Welcome to the Wayne Public Library's virtual author chat. My guest today is Roz Lee. USA Today best-selling author Roz Lee is the author of over 30 romances. The first, The Lust Boat, was born of an idea acquired while on a Caribbean cruise with her family and soon blossomed into a 5-book series originally published by Red Sage. Following her love of baseball, she turned her attention to sexy athletes in tight pants, writing the critically acclaimed Mustangs baseball series. Roz has been married to her best friend and high school sweetheart for nearly 4 decades. Roz and her husband have 2 grown daughters and are the proud grandparents to 3 adorable grandkids. Roz and her husband live in the wilds of New Jersey with their Labrador retriever, Bud, which is code for Big Unruly Dog. Even though Roz has lived on both coasts, her heart lies in between, in Texas. A Texan by birth, she can trace her family back to the Republic of Texas. When Roz isn't writing, she's reading or traipsing around the country on one adventure or another. No trip is too small, no tourist trap too cheesy, and no road unworthy of travel. Welcome, Roz. Please tell us a little more about yourself and your new novel, Breathless.
Well, thank you very much for having me today. Just on the bio, that's a little bit outdated. Today is actually our 44th wedding anniversary. So
thank you, and happy anniversary.
Thank you. But the rest of that's pretty muchly, that's spot on. That's me. Gosh, my latest book, Breathless, I usually write pretty steamy romance. Breathless kind of took me by surprise in that it's a little bit sweet, it's a little bit spicy. The main characters don't even kiss until like halfway through the book, and it's a pretty long book. So there are some open bedroom door scenes, but I would not classify this one as an erotic romance. So it just took me a little by surprise that that's who these characters were. So
it is part of a series.
It is the first in the what will be the Nightingale Vineyard series. The reason I wrote it and set it in a vineyard is I have, for the last 10 years, I've hosted a book signing at a local winery, the Brook Hollow Winery in Columbia. And the owner has asked me many times, or suggested many times, that I should write a book that's set in a winery. Well, I finally did. It took me a long time to come up with appropriate characters and reason to write that, but I finally did. So this is the first in the Nightingale Vineyard series, so which the vineyard bears little or no resemblance to Brook Hollow. but it was the inspiration. So it's unusual for a vineyard series to be set anywhere but Napa Valley. So this one is set in New Jersey. So
yay, yay, New Jersey. So do you think that the following books are going to be kind of sweet, not as steamy, or that was just a one and done?
No, I think the other 2, there will be 2 more. I'm pretty sure they're going to follow the same pattern. I just don't think this particular series lends itself to be erotic romance, though there's definitely going to be steam.
Steam is good. Steam is good. You've written both series and standalone. Should I ask, which do you prefer to write?
Hard question. I think in a way, standalone is a little more difficult to write because you have to contain the entire story in that book. When you're writing a series, you can leave some things unsaid, especially if it's like a family series, like the Nightingale Vineyards. The Ingram Brothers is a family series. You can leave a little bit unsaid about some of the characters because you know they're going to reappear in the next one. You know, this is their family, so you can tell some more about them as they go, as the relationship goes on. But in a standalone, I think you have to, or I feel like I have to tell the entire story, that I have to bring these people 100% to their happily ever after um, at the end of that story. And so a lot more goes into that. And my standalones tend to be longer books because of that. So, uh, or at least I think that's my opinion. But as to which one I like to do more than the other, I don't know. It's just I write whatever story comes to my brain, whatever one is knocking at the door the most for me to write, that's what I write. So.
Okay. And has there been a secondary character in any of the books that you've written that you loved and that you thought, okay, I'm definitely going to write a novel about this character?
Actually, yes. There are a couple of them. And one of my standalones, Lost Melody, it's one of my first books actually that I wrote early in my career. And there's an older gentleman, Henry Travis Sr., and he's a widower. And I've often thought I should give him a new happily ever after because he's been alone for a long time. So I was thinking it'd be fun to give him one, but you know, he's my age, so it's gonna, I don't know. I haven't got around to that yet. I hadn't figured out exactly how to do that for him, but maybe someday I will. And the other one is in another standalone, Nash the Trash. Um, Nash Sutton's personal assistant, Tyrone Blankenship, is a very flamboyant gay guy. And I thought he'd be fun to write a story about. So I don't know, maybe I will.
Sounds like both of them could really have good stories. Very interesting, very different. Not your.
And I actually had in the Mustangs baseball series, I had, let's see, in the book Going Deep, which is the second in the series, I had readers contact me and they wanted to know, they wanted more about a secondary couple in that book. So I went back and I wrote a prequel novella to the series that featured that couple. And I still got emails about that couple. And they said, well, we want to, you know, give them their happily ever after. What happens to them? So I eventually did, and I think it's book 5 in the series, Spring Training, is their happily ever after. So that was kind of a roundabout way. I thought just putting the prequel novella, how they met, and all would satisfy everybody, and it didn't. But Brooke and Todd were a very popular couple, so they're actually in 3 of those books in that series.
Wow. They're a successful couple, definitely. Definitely. Can you share a little about what you are currently working on?
Well, currently I have a thriller in the works. I wrote my first thriller, and it's under a different pen name, and that's Status Missing. So I'm working on the second thriller, and that's Status Nuclear. And I'm also working on the second book in the Nightingale Vineyard series. So, and I might throw in a Christmas novella in there. I was just thinking, it's like, I haven't written a Christmas story in a long time. I think that might be fun. So if I can get my head in the right space for Christmas, maybe I need to dig out some Christmas decorations. Oh, maybe I'll write one of those.
Christmas music also a possibility for inspiration.
Yeah. Need to be inspired to do that. But I was thinking it had been a long time since I've written anything with a Christmas theme, so it might be fun to do while it's still hot and summery.
Yes. Good time to think cold thoughts for Christmas. What inspired you to start writing in the first place?
Oh gosh. When my daughters were growing up, I was a stay-at-home mom, and I spent a lot of time reading. Library was my friend because we didn't have extra money. So I would go to the library and check out, as many books as they would let me take home. Big old stack, everything under the sun. And a lot of those were romances. And I read them all the time. That was my recreation when I was waiting for the kids to get out of school. Sitting in the line in the car, I would read. And when I was taking them to softball practice, I was sitting in the stands reading. I even perfected reading between pitches during an actual game. I figured that out, but I was reading all the time. So at one point, they were laughing at me about how many romances I read. They said, "Well, you've read so many, you could probably write one of your own." And they threw it out there like it was the biggest joke ever. Oh, my mother could never write a book. And I just thought, okay, I bet I could. So I started writing then, and I found out I was very bad at it, that I could tell a story, but I didn't know how to write the story down where people could read it. So I started looking for help in that respect. So I think I finally got that down pat. But I'm always learning. Hopefully my writing is getting better with every book. So
And
yeah, that was the dare from the kids.
how long did that book take you to write, to perfect? And how long
Well,
does it take you now?
it took me years to write that first book, literally years, more than I care to think about. It never did get perfected. No one will ever read that. So the story itself, I don't think was horrible. I just don't have the heart to go back and try to fix it now. I went on and started writing other things. And a matter of fact, that Standalone that I mentioned earlier, Lost Melody, is one of those first books that I started writing. And it eventually got finished. But yeah, the original first, nope, not going there again.
But how long, like from basically sitting down the first time to the end? Even though,
Uh, oh man, that first one, gosh, that was probably 6 years off and on, because I didn't know what I was doing, and I was literally writing it on paper by hand. Um, Now, the thrillers take me much longer. I would say over a year to write. The first one took me 14 months plus editing. So the second one, we're not going there as to what happened over COVID, why this one's still not out, but that's really difficult for me. It's a genre I'm not used to, so it's really taken me a lot longer to work on that. The romances, if I really have it in my head exactly what the story is going to be, then 4 to 6 months from first words to final edits, depending on the length of the book. So yeah, I'm not one of those turn out a book every month writers. Not going to happen.
well, honestly, that's good to hear, because sometimes I'm in shock when they tell me how quickly they produce. How many books have you put out over the years? When did you start? How long ago? Have
My first book was published, that was The Lust Boat, was published by Red Sage on January the 1st of 2011.
Okay.
So yeah, I've been at it for a while, and gosh, and honest to goodness, I've lost count. There's 30 something books out there. I don't know, it
11
doesn't
years.
matter.
Wow.
Some years I write more than others. This may come as a shock to some writers, but for me, my family comes first. I've got 3 grandkids and a husband at home, and so I'm going, when they need me, they come first. And so no matter how bad I want to write down, the next chapter, if my family needs me, the chapters are just going to have to wait. I'm sorry. But that's just me.
That's a good attitude. That's a good attitude. And yet you've still produced about 30 books in like 11 years. That's
Yeah.
impressive. Impressive. What is the most difficult part of the writing process for you?
Right now, I think it's turning off my self-editor. Telling myself it's okay to write a sentence that's not perfect and to just move on to the next, just keep writing. And to go back and fix it later. The perfectionist in me wants to go back and make every sentence perfect before I move on to the next one. And does that hinder productivity? Probably. Certainly slows me down. But I don't know, at some point you got to go back, you got to fix it, whether you fix it right now or whether you fix it later. I mean, at some point you're going to have to fix it. So does it really slow the productivity? I don't know. So yeah, that's me.
Do you plot your books?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Okay.
Well, that being said, I usually know before I start writing, I usually know where they're starting at, what's the first scene going to be. I usually have in my head what the last scene's going to be. And the romances, I have a pretty good idea what the inciting troubles are going to be, where that turning point is going to be in the book. I usually know that. Sometimes my characters will throw a monkey wrench in the whole thing and go off some other direction that I hadn't anticipated. And then I just follow them, because I found out that fighting that just doesn't work. It ends up with a mess of a book that can't be fixed. So when the characters do whatever it is they're going to do, I just write it down. I know that sounds like I'm insane. But I think maybe only another writer really understands that impulse. But yeah, your characters pretty muchly drive the story. So
Is it more like a movie in your head that kind of you see it like some authors say that they talk to me, other people are like, oh, it's like a movie in my head and I can see the scenes and the characters. Is it anything like that?
sometimes a little of both. I mean, it's different things. I mean, conversations will pop into my head. Especially when I've been trying to figure out, how to move the story forward or something, then the characters are already there, and they've been doing stuff and I know what they're doing. And then suddenly it'll be like, oh, this is the conversation they're having. What are they saying to each other? And it'll just pop into my head and I'll hear them going back and forth. And I was like, oh, okay, I need to write that down, or at least, get the gist of it so that I don't forget what they said to each other, because that's what I needed to progress the story on. I needed them to have that conversation. So yeah, I guess talking to me is probably more so than a visual, though at times I will see, I'll just imagine what the setting looks like. And I can imagine my characters moving through the setting. So again, probably a little crazy.
No. And do you, like you said, you have to get it down. Is it that you rush to your computer, or do you grab any paper or and a pen and just like get it down so that
I have a little tiny notebook that I carry in my purse all the time. And then there's an app on my phone for notes, and then I also have a dictation type thing on there that I can talk, just if I'm in a hurry, just record what I was thinking so that I don't forget it. But yeah, I need to not lose those thoughts. So, because I have in the past. It's very frustrating.
Well, that's probably not what they wanted to say, and went off in a different direction.
Yeah.
What was the most surprising thing that you've learned with while crafting your books?
Probably how difficult it is to write a book. I think, and we hear it all the time. Oh, I should write a book. you know, everybody's got a story. I should write a book about that. Yeah, haven't we all thought that? And that's exactly what I thought originally. Oh yeah, I could write a book. It's a lot more difficult. At least for me, it's been a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. And so yeah.
It is. Yes, it is. What was your publishing journey? Even though the first one didn't get published, the first manuscript you created, what what was that first one? The Lust Boat. How did you?
Well, that one I didn't even bother to send out queries about. At least I was an avid reader enough to know that when I read what I had written back to myself, I was like, no, this is horrible. It's horribly written. Good story, horribly written. Nobody's going to buy this. But once I had things that I thought might be publish worthy, yeah, I sent out more queries than I could even numerate here for you. And I probably have more rejections than anybody would ever imagine. So yeah, that's disheartening, but you just keep at it. And I tried not to let it totally discourage me. And, eventually I put a query out there and it was snatched up. So I was like, okay, maybe I'm not that horrible of a writer after all. Maybe I can do this. So yeah, you just have to keep going at it. You can't let rejection get you down, because as you and I discussed before we started recording, that there's something for everybody. And just because I sent it to that editor and she didn't like it doesn't mean that the next one I send it to is not going to like it. So everybody's looking for something different to read. So you just have to keep out there.
Yes, absolutely. Well, that's evidenced here at the library. We know.
That's right. That's why we have libraries full of books. So there's something for everybody.
Do you work with, or have you worked with, an agent or editor?
I have never worked with an agent. The published books I had went through publishers who did not require me to have an agent, which was good because I got to keep that bit of money for myself. Working with editors, oh yeah. Everything I put out there for public consumption has been edited and edited. And yeah, I know enough about my process to know that grammar is not my strong suit. So yeah, definitely. I got to have somebody to look that over and see if my sentence structure makes sense, if my grammar is right. Fix that for me. Show me how to do that. I'm better than I used to be. Mm-hmm. I would say that, better than I used to be, but still, it's something I try not to dwell on too much, is my shortcomings in the grammar, particularly in grammar.
And you mentioned that your early publications were through Red Sage. Currently, how are you publishing? Independent?
Currently, I'm entirely self-published.
Okay.
I'd also been with Lucid publisher, And I'd gotten the rights back to those books at fairly early on. Those were pretty short contracts. The Red Sage books, I didn't think I was ever going to get the rights back to those. But one of the wonderful things that happened to me during COVID was I actually got the rights back. I don't know. Here's my letter. I keep it up here. It's like, oh, thank you. I got those rights back during COVID. So I re-edited and put those books back up too. So self-published those. So yeah, entirely self-published now.
So when you say you work with the editor, these are people that you find yourself.
Right. Yeah.
How hard, how easy is it to find an editor
Well,
that you work with?
You know, some of them I originally had contact with through my publisher. So they either worked with me off the clock or recommended people to me. Friends, other writer friends who have editors that they like to work with. But I think it's a trial and error type situation to find an editor that you can work well with, that you can have a conversation with, that you can argue with, you know, because sometimes editors are not always right, you know, but they have to be able to listen to your argument why something should be the way it is. And you have to listen to their argument on the same and come to some sort of agreement. Occasionally, I'll have an argument that I win, but more than likely, I lose the argument and I go with what the editor suggests that I do. So, but yeah, I've won a few arguments and persuaded them over to my way of thinking on certain subjects. So, but yeah, I think it's the relationship that you have to have with your editor. If they won't accept anything that you have to say, that they want you strictly say, okay, you're going to make these changes and these changes, to me, that's not the right relationship. You have to be able to look at what they're suggesting and make your own decision whether or not it's right for your manuscript. And if they can't accept that, if they can't work with you like that, that's not the right relationship. So.
Now, I know you're part of the New Jersey Romance Writers Group. How important was joining a writers group or even having critique partners if you have them?
I will say this: when I first started writing and after I finished that first manuscript, one of the first things I did was I started looking for writers groups in the area. And we lived in Los Angeles area at the time. And I found the Los Angeles Romance Authors Group, which was a part of the Romance Writers of America at the time, still is, but I joined that group. And I will tell you straight up that had it not been for the wonderful authors that I met in that group, I wouldn't be an author today. They were the most welcoming and wonderful, thoughtful, helpful people I had ever met, generous with their time and their information and their help. Literally took me by the hand and guided me. So you need to do this, you need to do, here's a class for you to take. Here's, let me read some pages. Let me help you. What are you working on? They were instrumental. Can't say enough about having people like that behind you. Some of them are still friends today. Matter of fact, I saw one of them in Houston last week at a conference, and I had not seen her in ages. She now lives in Florida. And it was just like, it was so wonderful because she was, at the time I joined the Los Angeles chapter, she was already making her living as a writer and lived by herself and made her living with her writing. And she was so helpful to me. And, didn't talk to me like, oh, you don't know what you're doing. She was like, okay, let's see what you got. And then here we are both at the same conference as authors in our own right. And it's, because of people like her that I was there. So yeah, I can't stress enough how important it is to have other writers to talk to and to bounce ideas off. And if you need a critique partner, if that works for you, then by all means. I've had them in the past. I don't work with a critique group now because I just write so sporadically with, the family situations. It just really wouldn't be fair to anybody to just toss when I can. It's like, okay, here I am. Can you look at stuff? No. So I rely on editors now more than the critique groups. But when I first started out, oh yeah, invaluable. Got to have them.
Okay. And do you read any of your reviews, or would you encourage or discourage reading reviews?
Uh, I am guilty of reading reviews. They can be very uplifting. They can be soul crushing. I have one that is downright humorous. I actually used it as a promotional tool. It was a 1-star review, and it was for the Yankee Billionaire's Bride. And the reviewer listed all the horrible things that I had done in the first chapter of the book. And I read it and I said, did I really do all that in the first chapter? So I went back and read the first chapter and I said, I did. That's stuff on the back. I really got all that into the first chapter. Yay me. So, yeah, but others can be just flat out soul crushing. I'm not going to go into those, but there are some of those out there too. But what I write isn't for everybody. I hope I can find the reader that loves what I write, but sometimes somebody picks up stuff that they, it just doesn't resonate with them. And that's okay too. I'm sorry they feel that way, and it hurts for them to put that out in the public. But yeah, guilty. I know I shouldn't read them. I know I shouldn't, but yeah, I do.
And what one or more than one piece of advice would you give a new writer that's starting out?
Keep writing, no matter how discouraging it is. And like I said, if after I had written that first book and told that story from start to finish and read it back and decided it was horrible, which we've established it was, if I had stopped writing, I wouldn't have the satisfaction of having told all the stories I've told since then. And I feel like that if you are a writer, you are a storyteller. And that's something that just doesn't go away. I like to tell stories, whether they're verbal or whether they're in writing. I like to tell stories. So don't stop telling your stories. Tell them however works for you. And if you want to write them and you don't know how to write, writing is a skill. It's a craft that you can learn. And when I started writing that first book, it had been decades since I'd been to any kind of a writing class. So, the skill of writing had just basically left me. I didn't know how to structure a story. But that can be learned. You can take classes, and a lot of them, believe me, there are a lot of free classes out there. You don't have to go to college. You don't have to pay someone. There are a lot of free classes. There are ways to learn to write and craft a story. So don't give up on it. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep telling those stories.
Okay. And I usually save the last question and make it a fun question, and ask if there's any questions if for Roz, if you would want to type it into the chat and I will read it to her. Um, but in your bio, you mentioned no trip is too small, no tourist trap too cheesy, and no road unworthy of travel. What are some of the cheesy tourist traps you've visited, and would you recommend more people visit?
Um, Probably by far the cheesiest place that I can think of is up on the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. There's a tourist trap called the Uber's Tourist Trap. They don't even try to hide what they are. You know? And it's this souvenir store thing and with this big guy with there's a truck out front with this giant rifle on it. I mean, like 30 feet long. There's a giant chainsaw. The place is filled with all these tchotchkes and stuff. And I mean, honestly, they make no bones about them being a tourist trap. Said it right up on the sign. It's the Uber's Tourist Trap. Fun place to be. Um, there was a place that I was driving from Knoxville Airport to Gatlinburg, Tennessee for a reader event. And the GPS took me off into these two little 2-lane roads. And I stopped, I was starving. I stopped at this place called the Apple Valley Mountain Village. And it was a cheesy tourist attraction with I had like half a dozen different shops and stuff and a little cafe and all. It was cute. It was cute. And so I stayed there and got some food and relaxed for a little bit and figured out where I was and continued on. But that was a fun place to stop. But you just never know what you're going to find. It's neat souvenirs or, get to see the local people. There was a place up off the, oh God, up above the Shenandoah Valley. I can't even remember the name of the parkway. Anyway, there was a little town we got off to have some lunch, and there's just this little cafe thing that was in an old house and little red check tablecloths, the oilcloth things. And next to it was this like farmer's market thing, and they had these handcrafted metal work stuff and just local people's handcrafted stuff in there. Tons of fun. We brought home souvenirs.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
sounds
I'll
like
stop at anything.
okay. That's good. That's good. Uh, uh, find some treasures while you're out there, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Um,
that's where you find the best stuff.
yes. We have several questions for you. So,
Oh,
who
oh boy.
who was your favorite character to write?
Favorite character to write would probably be, and this is a little known story, is Elgin Huddleston in Still Taking Chances. I think he was my favorite because when I started that story, all I had was his name in my head. And that came to me when I was in the car with my husband. We were going somewhere. I don't know where we're going. Don't remember that. All I remember is just the name Elgin Huddleston popped into my head. And it took me several months before I started writing Elgin's story, but I knew I had to write Elgin's story, whatever it was. And so it turned out to be quite an interesting character, and I'll always be fond of Elgin.
Okay. Um, are any of your characters based on the people you know in real life?
There are some people in my first series, in the Lothario series, where the Lust Boat, there are some people in there whose names are real people. They don't, the characters don't necessarily resemble the real humans, but the names are actual people. I'm not going to tell you who they are, but
Okay, fair.
but
Um,
yeah, I think we put a little bit of ourselves and a little bit of everything that we are and everybody we know into our characters and our stories. So yeah, there are probably some little bits of people in there.
Okay. And what is your favorite part about hosting the book signing at the winery?
The favorite part is I get to spend the entire day with all my best friends who are authors. I mean, it doesn't matter if a single reader comes through the door, we're going to have a great time because it's a whole room full of authors. And I don't know, it's like having a barrel of monkeys. I mean, you cannot not have a good time when you've got a room full of authors because we're all a little bit crazy and we don't get out much. So once we do get out and we can talk because we all understand this stuff that's going on in our heads and our need to write and tell stories. So we always have a great time. But it's always great to have the readers come in too and interrupt us, but that's good. Doesn't matter. We're going to have a good time no matter what.
And what is your favorite wine?
My favorite wine, you want to know a secret? I don't drink wine.
Okay.
I am allergic to the sulfites in wine that naturally occurring in grapes. So I do not drink wine. I don't eat grapes and I don't eat raisins. so yeah, I know it defies explanation to host a book signing in a winery and not drink wine, but there it is.
Hey. Wow.
What the answer you were expecting, right?
No, I was not expecting that answer. What is your writing routine?
My routine, write when I can. That's my routine. As a self-published author, there's a whole lot of marketing that goes along with that. So I try to strike a balance with, what I can do writing wise and what I can do with the marketing situation. And luckily I spend, most of my day just me and the dog. So I try to write during the day because the dog doesn't interrupt too much. Then when my husband gets home, we have a few hours that it's our time together. And then he goes to bed early because he gets up really early. So I try to spend a few hours in the evening when it's really quiet. And then I can either write if I'm in the zone to write. And if not, then that's marketing time. So.
Okay. And do you listen to music while writing? If so, what kind?
70s music. Yep, 70s music. Got a whole playlist. But it's not ever present. This is why I'm not a huge audiobook fan personally, because it just becomes background noise. It's just something, it kind of drowns out the dryer when it's running. It's just a background noise. So.
And what was the most memorable reader encounter that you've had?
Oh, by far, I can tell you this one because it will always be my favorite. The first time a reader brought a book to a book signing that they had already read. They didn't just buy it there and have it signed. They had already read the book. They had it, read it. The pages were, rough. You know what a paperback looks like after it's been loved. And this reader came up to me with this already much loved copy of Inside Heat. And I almost burst into tears. It was because intellectually, you've sold books. So therefore, people are probably reading your books. And when you autograph and hand over a brand new book, okay, they're probably going to read it. But to have that visual of this thumbed through, well loved book, it just got me, you know. And I was like almost paralyzed. She was like, you know, you actually read this and loved it and you want me to sign it? Oh yeah, please let me sign this. So yeah, I will never forget that first time that somebody brought me a well-loved copy of one of my books to sign. So yeah,
That's a good
always
memory.
always be right there in my number one reader memory.
How do you find your beta or ARC readers?
I have a few people that I trust who will tell me the truth about my books. Um, Sometimes that truth is hard to hear. So, but I need to hear it. So that's over the years I've found those people, and they're the ones who get to read it first. And yeah, so like I say, sometimes it's hard to hear what they have to say. Kind of like an editor. Sometimes you don't want to hear that they didn't like those beautiful words you spent so much time working on. But yeah, you just have to find those people who will be honest with you and take their word for it. You know, that you somebody you can trust, that you believe they're going to tell you the truth, whether it's good or bad.
And how can people join your street team?
I don't have a street team. um, yeah, once upon a time I had a Facebook group, and I just could not devote the time to maintaining it, you know. So I archived that. Maybe someday I'll revive it, but I don't really have a street team. I'd appreciate it if you like what I write to visit my Facebook page. That's where I'm the most active. Um, Occasionally, you'll see me on all the other places, Instagram and Twitter. And believe it or not, I do have a TikTok account. Victoria, I have a TikTok account. That I absolutely hate, but I do have one. But yeah, you'll find me most active on my Facebook page. So that's about all I have the time and energy to maintain these days. I'm sorry to say.
Well, I want to say thank you so much, Roz, for joining us today and for this wonderful chat, I think. I
Oh,
hope you had a good time. Um, and, you know, I wish you all the best of luck with Breathless, which I know just came out recently, this week, last week, in the last couple weeks. Yes. And and you know what, the writing of all your future books. I know you have two more in that series and a few other things working on.
oh,
So I wish you all the best.
I have more stories in my head than you can possibly imagine. There's no way I could ever in the rest of my lifetime finish writing all the things that want to write. So I'll just keep plugging at it.